there was a journalist yesterday who said we could just hear the voice, and they said, "Don't you think you're too sexy to play this role?" And I thought she was talking to me.
Well, we're joined now by Dominic West and Jonathan Pryce, who feature prominently in the final series of The Crown. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
You're playing father and son, in fact. Prince Charles, and as he then was, and the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. They're people that all of us, have seen all our lives. Is it difficult coming to do a real person like that?
Well, in one way it is because of people's expectations, really, and especially coming into a successful show 4 seasons in, which has been so successful, particularly my character played by Josh O'Connor. And but in other ways it's a gift, because you get so much material to work off, and particularly in the filming of this last series with the death of the Queen and Prince Harry's book coming out and everything, there was just, I was watching television for 3 weeks straight, and just so much interesting material came out of that.
And what were you trying to do with the character of Prince Charles? I mean, what was it? Were you, as it were, going from the script, or was it the person that you'd seen and your own feelings about him?
Well, it's Peter's idea of him. It's always you're just acting out what the dramatist has created. But it just I don't know. I became fascinated with the man, and because this season was particularly emotional, Peter's portrayed Charles as very emotional in this season, and that opened up a big question for me, as how do these seemingly unemotional people, how do they howl in the Scottish glens or howl at a hospital room, and just watching that early when he took over as king, the sort of pen incident and stuff was really invaluable.
Do you think it's an over sympathetic portrayal? I mean, some people have said it shows him in a better light than maybe people had expected.
Well, I think as actors, I don't know what you think, Jonathan, you do sort of fight for your guy, and you do sort of give your characters the benefit of the doubt, as I suppose we all do of ourselves. And I did have a few discussions with Peter about, particularly last season, about certain aspects which probably I was trying to put my character in a better light.
And Jonathan, that's the interesting thing about the Duke of Edinburgh, as shown certainly, is that the public face of him is this sort of rather rude, curt person. I mean, certainly the only time I ever met him was at a news conference where his answer was, "That's a bloody stupid question," to my question. But what you show is really one of the most sympathetic and understanding and sensible members of the royal family.
Well, I think that's the role that came to him in later life, and he'd be older, wiser. He very much was the father figure, and then the grandfather figure of the family, and that was borne out after he died, when the endless documentaries about him. But there was one which featured the grandchildren and the children talking about him and just saying what a wonderful grandfather and father he was, apart from Charles, who, while saying what a wonderful father he was in pain. You could see that recounting stories about his father being overly critical, and Charles was laughing while saying it, but it was that it showed you the two sides of Philip. And I talked to people who, especially the carriage driving people that I trained with, and they absolutely loved him. They said he was very generous, he was very funny, he was great company, and I think he allowed himself that in later life.
Do you think he felt like an outsider?
He did. I mean, he said he did.
And you've said that you have done before. You've said that you feel like an outsider sometimes. I mean, does that help you play roles like this one and the Pope? I mean, they're the people who we can never really know, we can never really get close to.
When did I say it was an outsider?
In an interview.
In an interview.
She's done a research.
Don't believe everything you read in interviews. It's probably a class thing. Was I talking about being a working class Welsh boy? Yeah. That's why Dominic finds all these roles so much easier than I do. They didn't have a Welsh Eton when I was growing up. Anyway, I think, it's kind of coincidence in a way that the real characters, the real people I played are outsiders, Pope Francis especially. represented a completely different side of the Catholic Church when he became Pope. He was interesting to discover, if you want to talk about Pope Francis and stuff, about the inner life and the life we don't see. Because all I knew of him was the man who became Pope and how he behaved at the time when he was, in with the poor people and washing feet and feeding. And in fact, I based the character of High Sparrow in Game of Thrones on Pope Francis, not having read the second series of High Sparrow when he turns into this absolute monster.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. Things like when I went to Buenos Aires to film, and there was a particular priest who was advising us and how to conduct the mass and everything, and he'd worked under Bergoglio. And I said, "Oh, that's great. How was he? Did you like him?" No, none of us liked him. Well, why? He's this incredible disciplinarian, and he said that when he was made Pope and he appeared on the balcony, we didn't recognize him. I said, "Why was that?" He said, "Because he was smiling."
Wow.
We called him the man who never smiled.
Wow.
And so you see this guy in Rome on the balcony, at peace with himself and the world. And so you try to piece together what made that man be that man. And you do the same with the Duke of Edinburgh.
Yeah, we won't mention what the new president of Argentina said about the Pope. Unprintable.
I think anything this new president said is unprintable.
Yeah.
And Dominic, how about
moving on?
Eton? I don't know whether you filmed at Eton, but going back there, did it bring back happy memories?
Well, no, we were in Winchester actually, so no, I didn't. There were no memories really. But it was funny seeing all these boys walking around in the tails and the uniform.
Yeah, I was fascinated. Yeah. What's that sort of little? It's not a bow tie, kind of little thing that they seem to put over their white collar. What's that?
It's called a throwaway tie. It's just a piece of cotton that covers up your stud.
We got to ask you, what's your take on the Eton question?
What is
good institution, bad institution?
Well, I've sent my boys there, so
good institution.
That's a good one. Yeah.
What does it do?
Well, it found my talent and nurtured it as an actor, and I think that's what it does best.
It gave us Boris and Cameron as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dominic,
Maynard Keynes.
and George Orwell. All right, okay.
Dominic, can I ask you about? I mean, Jonathan, you referenced that Charles had a problem with his father and that he really found it very difficult. How hard is it for you? How hard was it watching, in a way, that play out again? Because you referenced, the sympathetic portrayal of Charles, but some of it is quite hard to watch, particularly, the scene where he's driving William back to school and he's trying his hardest playing, I think it's the Spice Girls he's playing on the radio. He's really trying, but he just can't reach out emotionally. He just can't bring himself to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that's I saw that scene as William's aggression or William's.
Maybe that's because you're fighting for your man.
Yeah, I'm fighting for my man. I mean, you do. You don't. It's difficult to play someone who's totally non-emotional. It's much easier to think of it as he's not getting through to his teenage son, which I think a lot of fathers are familiar with. But in terms of playing with Jonathan, was it this season where we had that where he tears a strip off?
Last season.
It was last season, okay.
Yeah.
Where he tore a strip off him, and that was horrible. I couldn't speak to Jonathan for weeks afterwards.
Yeah, I loved it. In fact, we did a lineup for cameras, and I came off the set, and Peter Morgan was sitting there, and he said, "I think I should cut some of that. It's a bit too hard and all that kind of stuff." And I pleaded for my case to be as horrible as possible to Charles. Because I think it was valid. I think it is what happened to him.
I mean, you're both parents, and I found some of those scenes with William and between the three of you, as it were, the three men, pretty harrowing.
Yeah, well, my coming to William and being the sort of mentor and the grandfather figure, it was quite poignant for me because I never had that kind of relationship with my father. My father died when I was still quite young, and I've told the story of his death often enough, but it came at a point he'd had a stroke, he couldn't speak, and it was at a point where we were about to have a reconciliation when he saw the play Comedians that I did in the 70s. And he sent a message to my mother, or said to my mother before he stopped speaking entirely, that he wished he could have spoken to me like the teacher in the play did. And I thought, this is great, we can now move on. And then he had a stroke and he never spoke again. So those scenes with William being the wise father figure were particularly poignant for me to do.
And what about for you, Dominic? Do you find it a bit hard?
Yeah, I mean, well, my son obviously was playing William last season, so I was glad he wasn't playing him this season, just because of the very heavy nature of the scenes they had together, and telling him his mother had died. And I think, but that scene you talked about earlier, where everything, and the way Peter wrote it actually, was everything he does irritates William, and the way he eats his toast, the way the way he fiddles with everything, the way he listens to Radio 3, everything annoys him, and I think a lot of parents can recognise that.
That was me and my father.
Yeah,
he couldn't do any right in my eyes.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you think the impact of The Crown's been? I mean, it's been 9 years, a decade nearly since it started, and it's attracted millions of people. And I have to say, enormously high production values, great scripts, great actors, etc. Do you think it's changed the way people see the royal family? I mean, there was a sort of sense, wasn't there, of the Queen was wonderful, but at the same time, Princess Diana was a victim. Do you think it's changed any of that?
I think it has, and especially when you get to episode 10 and the end of the whole series and the final tableau and the few words that were spoken then. And when we saw that episode, the person sitting next to me said, well, that's the royal family, good for another 50 years.
Does it feel like, because some people have said that it's a PR campaign for the royal family?
Well, I think it's by accident.
Are you happy?
I hope
Are you
it's
happy
by
to play
accident.
part in that, though?
Yeah, because to me, it's a script and they're characters on a page, and people are not stupid; they can make their own minds up about them. But it shows you how the public were very anti the royal family at the time of the death of Diana, and the royal family had to adjust for the public. I think if we're going to have a royal family, I think this one, and with Charles and William, they're a good one to have. If we're going to have one, if we've got to have one.
Do we have to have one?
Apparently. Yeah.
What do you think? You're happy to be in a publicity campaign for the royal?
I wouldn't call it that. But we've had a lot of criticism that this is what the world is going to think of the royal family. How could you portray them like
a lot of it's very anti-royal family.
Yeah, and
that we're showing them in a bad light.
Yeah,
I mean, what struck me is that this last series, the Queen, is actually much more negatively portrayed than she often is seen to be.
Right. God, I didn't see that.
She's what? I'm sorry?
I thought it was her apotheosis.
Portrayed as what?
Well, she seems to be the one most committed to duty and the least responsive to the personal issues, if you like.
Right.
Which is perhaps unsympathetic, or perhaps, Gloriana. I
think it's a bit, I can't speak too much for the real people, but I think it's the way that she had gone. It was her way of coping, was to just play by the rules and play by the book. And more than one person has said she appears like an automaton, and people who've met her, and she was incredibly warm, kind person, I hasten to add, but they had to do their duty, especially in public, and that was an interesting thing about playing them, and that we had an expert a royal expert on the set every day, and Imelda and I had our first meal together across tables, and both with similar backgrounds, and the servants put the food down, and we both turned to say thank you, and the advisor, no. What? You'd never say thank you. Oh, what do you do then? Just ignore them. Oh, okay. And having that as your baseline, it's wonderful to act, because you can be as minimalist as possible, you know.
Didn't you
Yeah.
say that about the body language of Charles? Your natural persona is to lead,
Yeah.
but he would never lean in.
That was one of the first things I was told by Polly, the movement, that, when shaking hands, you naturally lean towards the person, and it was, you'd always wait for them to come to you. And that teaches you so much about what a character's like.
Yeah.
And that he's always knows exactly where he's going. That was one of the first things you
They're
learn.
very economical with their gestures. And it's a way to get through it. I mean, it's like doing a red carpet at a premiere. You know, what's his name? Tom Cruise spoiled it for all of us because he stopped to have his photograph taken with everybody. And now a red carpet takes hours.
He takes about 3 hours on the red.
Yeah.
Does he?
Nightmare.
I wanted to ask you about this. I mean, we're very, very grateful that you're here as part of a junket launching it. But, I mean, do you actually hate this part of the process?
I don't. No. I quite enjoy it. Yeah.
No, I do. It's really interesting when for instance, we're talking to journalists from Colombia and Ireland and getting their opinion that I would never normally hear. Usually it's positive for the Crown anyway, and that's fascinating. What isn't great is talking to answering the same question 70 times in a day, and you by the end of it you don't know what you've said and how many times you've repeated the same old
I enjoy
joke.
mixing it up a bit. Because I was in LA, Dominic didn't come to LA. I had to do it all myself. And I spoke to hundreds of journalists from all over the world. Everybody got 5 minutes. And the rest of the world are total fans. And it makes it really easy to do. It's just great.
Because I always think it must be the hardest part of your job, as you say, doing dozens of interviews in a day and several different places.
Endless mind-numbing repetition is part of our job description.
Thanks for that. We'll take it. Jonathan, you mentioned real people. Dominic, I think I'm right in saying you did a pretty hardcore trek with Prince Harry. Did you get his take on how to play his father?
Well, that was over 10 years ago. I think that was so.
We'll still have his number though, surely.
No, we sort of no. I said too much in a press conference, and so we didn't speak after that.
What did you say?
I think I was asked what we
Don't
did.
say it again.
What we did to celebrate when we got there, and probably said something too much.
I see. Have you had any feedback at all from any of the royals?
Nothing official. No. One of our cast met one of the royal family who intimated that they watched it. In fact, when I don't know. Yeah, when I was here we go. Nobody listens to this, do they?
No.
When I was made a knight and I went to Windsor, and it was Princess Anne who dubbed me, and I was in the middle of playing her father, and there'd been intimations that she'd seen some of it. And so she put the sword lightly on the shoulder, and I stood up, and I said, thinking she was thinking of, I said, well, I don't know what to say to you. Sorry? And she said, why? It's done now. Now, whether she meant I was saying sorry for being made a knight, or sorry for, you've played my father, and it's done the way you've done it. It's, whatever. It was quite an amusing moment.
Wonderfully enigmatic.
Yeah, she's got to be one of the favourites, hasn't she?
I think so, yeah.
To watch it.
No, one of the favourites in terms of if
Characters.
you were picking a royal family member that would be your favourite, she's got to be up there, surely.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I was working one, isn't she?
I saw her make an hour-long speech about Save the Children without any notes, which was
Yeah.
very detailed, and I thought that's impressive.
Yeah.
And our Princess Anne, Claudia, is one of the favourites, definitely.
Yeah.
She's a lot of fun. She's great.
Okay, now you've done Fred West and you've done Prince Charles.
What's the
Adam.
link?
Who's on your list of real people that we've all heard of?
Putin, Hitler.
Boris Johnson?
Thanks. No, I always thought Richard III as Jimmy Savile would be interesting, but then I realised actually Richard III's funny and interesting.
Didn't you say you thought you might have been miscast in this role? Or you can understand why people thought you were miscast?
Oh, yeah. No, I was told by everyone I met. Oh, no, I think that's totally wrong. Why did they cast you?
Well, there was a journalist yesterday who said we could just hear the voice, and they said, don't you think you're too sexy to play this role? And I thought she was talking to me.
What did you say? You're definitely 100%.
And what about you? You got your new film coming out about Nick. Who else do you want to do as a real person?
Oh, no. I just want to get on with being me for a bit, I think. Yeah. Quite enjoying not working. It's good.
That is good.
I
Dominic,
can't
can I
think
ask
of a
you?
show that you're not in.
I know.
Can I ask you before we go? I mean, Charles has a lot of political views. We're political journalists, and he's in the past been accused of sharing them. How do you think he feels having such a huge public platform and clearly being incredibly well informed, but being completely unable to express them?
Well, it's part of the really fascinating tension in his life that I found so interesting, that, you know, aged in his 50s, he's still having to ask his mother's permission as to what girl he's allowed to marry. And then just noticing that at the opening of Parliament, where he's having to say, my government will do nothing about climate change and, be mean to refugees. And it's just, I suppose that's the tension that the Crown is exploring between the private and the public persona, and the contradictions and difficulty of yoking those two together.
Yeah, but then he took himself off to COP28 and gave a very eloquent speech.
Wearing a Greek tie.
A perfectly eloquent, wonderful speech.
Knowing him a little, do you think that was deliberate?
It would have to be,
I
wouldn't it?
thought so, yeah.
I think he thinks very carefully about what he wears.
I think he does, yeah.
Well, somebody does.
Yeah.
Thinks very carefully what he wears and which
Right.
toothpaste he uses.
The Lord Chancellor told me once that he spent a weekend as the Prince of Wales guest at Sandringham, and in the 48 hours he was there, Charles had 13 changes of clothes.
Oh, I'm going to miss him.
Dominic West, Jonathan Pryce, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
It's a pleasure.